She wasn't lost. She was discarded. And that night, the cold wasn't the cruelest thing outside his door. The night was black as burnt coal, the kind of cold that bites through skin and soul. But what waited outside Ewan Gray's cabin wasn't just frost or silence. It was a woman, barefoot, bleeding, shaking, but not broken. Her name was Sena. She didn't beg for food. She didn't plead for pity. She just said, "I'm freezing. Please." What Ewan didn't know then, what none of us could stomach hearing, is that she'd clawed her way out of hell. Sold, traded, raped, beaten, until she bled out the last thing she had left, her unborn child. And the town knew. They knew. They let it happen. This isn't just a tale of survival, it's a war cry. About what happens when a man with nothing left lets one woman in, and together, they build something no bullet, no shame, no past can erase. Before we begin this wild ride into truth, survival, and justice. If this story hits you in the gut, like it did to us, drop a number 1 in the comments, and subscribe for more Wild West tales that don't sugarcoat anything. If you don't like it, hit that like button anyway, we dare you. And trust us, watch till the very end. There's a twist coming that you won't see coming. Ewan didn't speak when she stepped over the threshold. He didn't ask for her name or who she'd run from. He just closed the door, bolted the lock, and stood there watching as this broken, half-bare woman collapsed by the fire like a hunted animal finally finding the edge of the woods. But the room wasn't quiet. Not in Ewan's mind. The scars along her legs, the bleeding at her inner thighs, the bruises around her collarbone in the shape of fingers. None of it needed words. He had seen violence served in a war that had no winners, but what lay before him now made his hands twitch with an old fury he hadn't felt in years. He laid a blanket over her without touching skin, boiled water, placed a tin of salted meat on the stove. Not for charity, but for decency. And because she hadn't asked for anything more, he watched her hands, trembling. She held them out to the flames like she wasn't sure they still belonged to her. She didn't cry, didn't look up, didn't dare. Sena. That was the name she whispered hours later when he asked again, softly. Her voice was cracked. Her lips bled when they moved. But the name stayed. So did she. The bleeding hadn't stopped completely. Ewan noticed the dark stain on the blanket near her knees. He said nothing, just stood and fetched the linen he used for old bullet wounds. She flinched when he handed her the roll. "You can wrap it," he said, voice low but steady. "I won't look." She stared at him for a long second, then nodded. Not because she trusted him, but because in this cabin, with its rough walls and uneven floor, no one was coming for her. Not to save, not to take. When she finished, he brought her a clean shirt and set it down. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and turned to face the wall. Her silhouette shook behind the fabric, but she dressed. He made no move toward the cot. Instead, he laid out his bedroll beside the stove, close to the fire but far from her space. She didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. That night, neither of them slept well. The fire cracked. The wind howled through the seams in the logs. And sometime just before dawn, he heard it, a sound that wasn't wind. Her breath caught, her shoulders jerking under the wool. A quiet whimper cut short before it could become a sob. Ewan didn't turn around, but he whispered, "You're safe now." And in the silence that followed, she didn't answer. But the sound stopped. By morning, she was gone from the cot. But not gone. She was crouched near the fire, arms wrapped tight around her knees, staring at the embers. Her face was pale, but her back was straight. Ewan handed her a tin mug of black coffee. Her hands trembled as she took it. But she drank. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, sharper than he expected. "They sold me 4 times, she said. Each one worse than the last. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. One of them. He wanted a baby. Thought it would be a legacy, or some twisted proof he could pass on." Evansiaf clenched. "I lost it in the wagon," she added. "No one helped. They just told me to wipe the blood and keep quiet." He stood up, walked to the door, threw it open. The cold rushed in, but he needed it. That kind of anger doesn't burn hot. It burns clean. He shut the door softly, turned, looked at her. You're not property. Sina looked up, eyes hollow, but alive. Not anymore, she whispered. And just like that, something shifted. Not healed, not forgiven, but seen. The first time Sena tried to walk beyond the porch, her legs folded like broken timber. She gritted her teeth, caught herself on the railing, and stayed upright not from strength, but from rage. Rage at what had been taken. Rage at what her body now refused to do without protest. Ewan stepped behind her but didn't reach out. He knew better. I need to move, she said through clenched teeth. Then we'll move slow, he replied. That morning, under a sky the color of old tin, they stepped out together. The snow had hardened overnight, crusting thick over the trail. Senna leaned on a split-handled broom as a makeshift cane. Ewan didn't offer pity, he offered silence. And in that silence, they crossed 20 feet. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask her to. Instead, they worked. He brought the axe. She carried kindling in trembling arms. He split the wood. She stacked it crookedly at first, then straighter, each row more certain than the last. Her breath came in quick bursts. Her fingers cracked in the wind. But she didn't stop. By midday, her hands bled through the bandages. You're overdoing it, Ewan said finally. Sina stared at her palms. I've done worse. For men who spat on me after. He didn't respond. What could he say that didn't sound hollow? That she was safe now? That justice would come? Justice wasn't coming. They both knew it. That evening, she sewed her own dress back together, the deerskin torn beyond decency, patched at the hips with the inside of a feed sack. When Ewan offered her one of his flannels, she refused it. I don't want to disappear in someone else's clothes, she said. This is mine, torn or not. Later that week, Ewan took her to the stream, a half-frozen vein, cutting through the woods east of the cabin. He didn't say why, just handed her a bar of lye soap and stood back while she waded ankle-deep and shivered under the weight of memory. He turned around while she washed. She didn't ask him to. When she stepped out, teeth chattering, bruises still purpling her back, he wrapped her in a wool blanket and led her home. No words passed between them. But when she laid down that night, she slept through till morning for the first time since arriving. A few days later, the dreams began. They weren't quiet things. They came screaming, her voice split the night, her limbs flailing like she was still tied. Still gagged. The third night, when she struck the wall so hard she opened a fresh wound on her wrist, Ewan sat at the edge of her cot and said nothing. He just held the lamp low and let her see his face, not pitying, not cold, just there. Sina turned away and cried for the first time. Not because of pain, but because no one stopped her. Winter cracked its spine slowly that month. The wind eased. The ice turned slush. One afternoon, Ewan found Sina near the tree line with a rope in her hand. She was building a snare. Rabbit? He asked. Anything with a heartbeat, she replied. By week's end, she'd caught 2. By the next, she was skinning them at the bench without flinching. Her hands moved with method. Not out of joy, but necessity. Her grandfather had taught her, long before the men came with offers of food and trade that turned to ropes and gags. I was strong once, she said one night, her voice low over the stew pot. Before they made me forget it. You still are, Ewan answered. She didn't agree, but she didn't argue either. That same night, a rustling came from the southern edge of the property. Ewan stood, hand to the rifle. Sena froze mid-step. You think it's them? She asked. I think it's a raccoon, he said. But I'll check anyway. She reached for the second rifle leaning by the door. The same one he'd shown her how to load days ago. I'll go with you. Ewan looked her over. The limp in her foot was nearly gone. Her eyes were clear, sharper now. All right, he said. But we move quiet. They walked side by side under a bruised sky. Nothing stirred but wind and ash branches. The tracks were small, too light for boots. He was right. A raccoon. But on the way back, Sina stopped. There, buried under a drift by the fence, was a piece of torn fabric gray, oil-stained, too clean to be old. Someone's been here, she said. Ewan's jaw tensed. He took the cloth and sniffed. Kerosene. Wagon grease? Recent. They didn't speak of it that night. But the second rifle stayed loaded. And Ewan, for the first time since the war, didn't sleep. Sana did. Her breath even, face calm. But her hand never left the weapon beside her cot. She was healing, yes. But not safe. Not yet. And neither of them were ready to believe in peace. 3 nights later, the dog returned. Ewan didn't own a dog, but he recognized this one, a half-wild shepherd mix that used to trail the fur traders along the ridge 2 winters back. Scarred ear, cloudy left eye, ribs like knife handles beneath its hide. It limped into the clearing just before dusk, collapsed near the porch, and whined. Its fur was crusted in blood, not its own. Ewan approached cautiously, rifle ready. Sina stepped out behind him, a pot of broth in hand. The dog didn't move. He's been running, she said, kneeling beside it. And he's seen something he shouldn't have. Tied to the dog's collar, knotted tight, was a torn scrap of leather. It stank of smoke and urine. A brand mark was faintly visible. A forked cross inside a circle. Sina froze. "That's them," she whispered. Her voice didn't tremble. "That's the brand of the ones who kept me." Ewan didn't speak. He stared at the leather, then at the dog, then at the tree line. "They tracked me this far?" "No," he said slowly. "This was a warning. They know you're here, and they want you to run again." But she didn't run. That night, Sina sat cleaning the dog's wounds in silence. She worked slowly, methodically, like she was treating something more than flesh, like she was telling the animal you made it out to. Ewan bolted the cabin, loaded all 3 rifles, and poured salt around the perimeter. The storm came at midnight, but the real storm was already inside. He found her by the fire after midnight, legs folded, eyes wide open. "I won't let them take me again," she said. "You won't have to." She nodded once. "I want to be ready." So he trained her. Every day for a week, they drilled. Ewan didn't go easy. He taught her how to handle recoil, how to reset a jammed chamber, how to stay low in tall grass. Sina listened with frightening precision, not because she wanted revenge, but because she refused to ever be caught helpless again. And something changed in her. The bruises faded, but the gaze sharpened. Her shoulders squared. She started tying her hair back, not to look proper, but to see clearer when she aimed. At night, she'd clean the weapons twice. Then sit by the window and whisper stories to the dog about places she might go someday. But she never said when, because deep down, she knew. There was no going back. And maybe, just maybe, this place wasn't just a stopover. It was a stand. By the 7th night, Ewan didn't ask if she was ready. He only said, "They'll come from the south. There's cover by the ravine." Sena nodded. Let them come. And when her fingers tightened around the rifle, Ewan didn't see a victim anymore. He saw a survivor armed with fire, the kind that doesn't burn out, the kind that fights back. No, they came just before dawn, not loud, not charging like fools. No, they crept shadows among snow-laced pine, boots muffled by ice and wool. These weren't desperate men. These were traffickers, professionals, the kind that didn't knock, the kind that didn't miss. Ewan saw the glint of metal first. Scope flash, 30 yards out. Too clean, too still. "They're here," he said. Sena didn't flinch. She had already braided her hair tight and laced Ewan's spare boots over her ankles. The rifle was loaded, cocked, and resting across her lap. Her fingers tapped slow against the woodstock, like a heartbeat she had mastered. Ewan motioned toward the trapline path. "There's cover in the ravine. If we pull back, we can bait—" "No," she said sharply. "We don't run. Not again." And she stood. This time, he didn't argue. He followed her to the shed, where they'd hidden the second rifle and the sawed-off beneath the hay pile. Together, they moved like soldiers who didn't need to speak anymore. The first shot came from the tree line. Splintered the corner post of the porch in half. Ewan ducked behind the crate stack. Sena rolled under the cartwheel and returned fire. One shot. Clean. No hesitation. No fear. A scream cracked through the trees, brief and silenced. They weren't expecting resistance. They damn sure weren't expecting her. From behind the cabin, a second wave rushed in 3 men, fast, leather coats, slapping like whips. One held a branding rod still warm from the fire. Ewan's blood turned. They hadn't just come to reclaim her. They came to mark her again. Like property. Senna saw it too. And what came over her face wasn't fear. It was fury. She stood in the open, aimed square, and fired at the man with the iron. He dropped like a sack of feed, smoke rising from the hole in his chest. "Not yours," she growled. Another man lunged toward her, blade in hand. But Ewan moved faster, tackled him into the snow, and drove the butt of his rifle into the man's face until it was pulp. The last man hesitated, backed away. Senna walked toward him. Slowly. Rifle still raised. He dropped his weapon. "Please. I didn't touch you. It wasn't me." She didn't blink. "You watched." He opened his mouth. Maybe to beg, maybe to lie. But she shot him through the leg. He dropped, screaming. "You'll crawl back," she said coldly. "Tell the others. She's not yours. And neither are the rest." Ewan didn't speak. He just stood behind her, quiet and stunned, not at what she did, but at how right it felt. They buried the dead behind the ridge, 3 shallow graves marked only by torn shirts tied to sticks. The crawler was left to limp back toward whatever hell had spawned him. Sena watched him disappear into the snow, then turned and spit. The air had gone deathly still. Even the trees didn't rustle, but something shifted in her shoulders. Not relief, not pride, but weight. A burden dropped. For the first time since that blood-soaked wagon, she wasn't prey anymore. She had hunted back.